Hello, and welcome to this live stream production from Caffe Lena, the historic listening room in Saratoga Springs, New York. Today's free stream is made possible by the generous support of the Sarah B. Folk Charitable Fund, as well as by the Adirondack Trust Company Community Fund, Kevin and Claudia Bright, Polly Sett, and our Virtuoso and Lifetime members. You can watch past episodes of this series on youtube.com/CaffeLena. To learn more about our nonprofit venue and programs, please visit caffelena.org. Enjoy your front row seats for this event, live from Caffe Lena.
Okay. This is Serving Saratoga, Conversations with Community Leaders. And this is an ongoing monthly series, but this happens to be the final episode in the series, the grand finale. And I am here with somebody really special today. But this monthly meetup has been going on for about a year, and it's supported by the Adirondack Trust Company and the Saratoga Chamber of Commerce as a way of facilitating collaboration among the impact sector organizations in Saratoga County. And my goal with these conversations is to extract a few nuggets of wisdom and life lessons from the brilliant, dedicated people who lead our local nonprofits. And today I'm here with Maggie Fronk. She is the CEO of Wellspring, which is an organization dedicated to ending sexual and relationship abuse and supporting the survivors. You have a gorgeous new building. You run a healthy, deeply respected and deeply needed organization, and you've been doing it for more than 2 decades. And within the community represented here in this series, you are a hero. And so I really look forward to this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Sarah. I love being here. I usually love being here out in the audience, but it's always great to be up here with you. And I'm so glad you told everybody ahead of time that this was planned to be the last one,
Yeah.
so they don't blame me for ending it.
That's right. So let's start at the beginning. You have really spent your entire career helping people who are going through intensely traumatic situations. How did you come to choose that path, and what makes it a fit for you?
Okay. And before this, so I've worked at Wellspring for 21 years, but before that I worked with folks with serious mental illness, with folks with HIV and AIDS, and homelessness. So a lot of really serious issues, as you said. And I think I came to it from a very young age. I saw that there were people in the world who were struggling with things that might have been out of their control. And all it ever takes is one person who cares, who listens, who supports, to maybe be that person who gives somebody something to hold on for, something to work for. And I just kind of grew up knowing that. And it didn't really matter which of those causes, there's always an opportunity to help people.
Was that part of your family culture, would you say?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, found that one myself.
You found it yourself.
Yes.
Wow. That's, and I do really hear that from people, people who get into things like being public defenders or being social workers in really tough situations. It's like once you realize that you're the person who's capable of feeling compassion for people who generally don't get a lot in this world, it's really hard to ever step back from that because you know how needed you are.
Yeah, and I think it's about not having judgments about what's not right with someone. I think we have this image of perfection. None of us are perfect human beings. I think about Leonard Cohen, who says, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And to me, that is, we can look at someone who's maybe struggling with a substance use disorder, struggling with mental health, struggling with a physical disability, and to think, that's not perfection. But you know what? That's what makes us human. The Japanese pottery, kintsugi, where you don't throw away a vessel because it's got an imperfection, it's got a crack. What you do is you fill it with gold, and you honor the beauty in what makes that vessel resilient and unique. And I think that's what we do in human services, is to honor the journeys that people have had and the strength and resilience in coping with the challenges that they've had and where they are.
And I think that you have to be able to embrace both this simultaneous presentation of beauty and brokenness, and not be trying to erase one or the other.
Absolutely.
That's so complicated and so hard for us to do. When you, like you said, there's this image of perfection that we're all, kind of trained to strive for, and to hate all the rest of it.
Yeah. And isn't that vessel with the craggy lines and the different paths so much more interesting than one that is just right off the factory line with perfection?
That's for sure. So, and then within that commitment and within that spirit that you've described, I think that you bring this whole other thing, which is that you're a natural leader. And there are many ways to serve in the social services. You seem to have held leadership positions for pretty much your whole career. You've been the CEO of Wellspring for, as you said, 21 years now. Are there kind of key elements in your leadership philosophy?
Sure. I think one thing is hire people who are smart. Hire people who are smarter than you and know their job better than you know their job, and trust in that. Do not micromanage. And I kind of see that the leader's role is just vision, is looking at where we want to go, and not just looking outside the box, but thinking, do we even need a box? What can we do different? And then kind of telling people that vision and letting them rein you in when needed, because my staff have to do that, but also exciting them about the work they do and how it could be done differently, and what we could make as a different end goal than just helping, in our case, just helping people who have experienced abuse. We actually made our vision statement supporting survivors and engaging the community to end relationship and sexual abuse. We did the big goal, and we said, we're not going to do it together. We're going to do it with all of you. So I think that is thinking about how you can do things bigger, and getting the right folks to amplify your voice in that.
That's amazing. So clearly you're not afraid of a big challenge.
Nah.
And probably not really afraid of putting out a goal that, you might get there in your lifetime, and maybe you won't, but that doesn't change the fact that that's the goal.
And also not afraid of failure. And I think that's one thing, particularly in the impact sector, that there's an expectation that we can't try something and fail. But you look at business. Successful businesses are always innovating, always trying something new, and that didn't work. Let's find out what we learn from that. So I think that's important in leadership too, is to say, let's try, let's get some life lessons, let's bring it to another level.
What you just said is really interesting to me, because one thing that I have heard throughout this conversation series is a little bit of we need to be as good as business kind of attitude. And, we need to prove to our donors that we're as smart and as capable as a real business. And what you said just sort of turns that on its head.
Okay, whoa. First, we are real businesses. And we are real businesses with constraints that for-profit businesses don't always have. I think, for example, in human services, very often when there's tight times, government grant money goes down, our resources, we become very, very under-resourced, and yet our clients need us more, and we survive. I think COVID was a great testament to that for all of us. We had folks who were sheltering at home for safety for everyone, and yet we were out doing the work. We were doing the work under-resourced. The folks we had housing instability and food insecurity, and for my issue, they were sheltering at home with their abuser and their kids and working from home, and the abuse was escalating, and they couldn't come to us or call us. We had to find ways to help them. So you say we have to be as good as real businesses, and I hear that a lot. We are real businesses, and we're really innovative and really cost effective. And sometimes we are constrained because we aren't allowed to operate like real businesses, to take risks, to have the pay scales that are needed to really attract and retain the talented workforce. And I look at you folks, going back to COVID, the arts were such a saving grace for so many people who needed it, and you found ways. You're used to having a room full of people here, and you found ways to reach the community when they couldn't come here. So we're really innovative businesses.
I think we are. When COVID hit, and I thought, oh God, there goes all of the money, all of the customers, all of the everything. There was a big part of me that was like, cool, I know how to deal with scarcity.
Uh-huh.
And we can really shine in this moment because we know how to get things done when there's nothing to do it with.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. What has been your biggest challenge as the leader of Wellspring? What have you learned along the way about management of both people and projects? And is there any kind of specific story around challenge that you could share and how you dealt with a big challenge?
Okay. Oh, we had a really big challenge just a couple of years ago. So we had been planning, as you mentioned, our building, which you've now been for a little over 2 years. That had been in the plans for a long time. And it was never about getting a building. It was getting a place for us to do our work that was more visible and accessible to our community, that had space that people could come in and feel that they were respected and they were safe and there was light and there was hope and there was privacy and safety. And so we'd had a plan for a big building, and we were about to do the agency's first capital campaign ever. And we'd spent years, too many years, many, many years, patience is not my middle name, getting ready for that first moment. And it was in March of 2020, we went to meet with our first foundational donor. And the next day, the world shut down. At which point we said, we can't do this. We can't go to our community that is so supportive and so caring when they don't know what's happening with their families, with their employees, with their businesses. We can't ask them for funding. And so we stopped the campaign for 6 months. And during those 6 months, as I said, things escalated. And I looked at the plans we had for our building, which would have been perfectly pandemic friendly with the space that we had. And after 6 months, we said, we think we got to do it anyway. We don't know how this is going to work, but we've just got to try. We did an entire capital campaign with the exception of 2 meetings, all on Zoom, because we couldn't sit in rooms with people. And our community came through and actually gave us the entire amount of funding that we needed to give us the building where we could do this work. But I got to tell you, it was like the first ever capital campaign ever. That one was a challenge to have it just shut down the day after you have your first meeting.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can imagine. And I can imagine that feeling of, we can't go to people right now. Their lives are topsy-turvy. But then I remember we had a conversation during the pandemic, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that you said that your demand for services had gone up 600%.
Yeah. Yep.
So how could you do without the building?
And that's what it came to. And finally, seeing those numbers is when we had 5 very brave women. My development director, Stevie Fellows, Linda Toohey, Steph Collins, and Erica Fuller. And I sat in a room and we said, we don't know if we can do this, but the world needs us to do it. And I think that's part of what it takes for leadership is courage.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just don't stop. Yeah, just be unstoppable. Like, you might not know what the next challenge is. You might not be able to predict what your answers are going to be to when the challenge comes through the door. But when it comes through the door, just keep moving.
My family tends to say I'm the most stubborn person they've ever met, but I think what they really mean is tenacious and persistent.
I'm sure that's what they mean. What gets you, this is just sort of looking at the day-to-day of work, because there are the grand, huge challenges, and then there's just the grind. What gets you excited about your work on a given day?
Okay. What gets me most excited is being there for somebody who needs it, and also the hope that I can be out of a job because we have ended this and don't need this work anymore. And that's really what I work toward every day. It's to helping people feel safe, but also making a better future.
Yeah, keeping the big picture in mind while you're doing all the daily stuff that needs to be done, while the phone's ringing and the emails are pouring in and there's the to-do list, but always this higher sense of purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started out as a counselor in mental health. I never thought I would be the pencil-pushing bureaucrat in the agency. And yet, what I saw over the years is that if you've got a leader who's got that vision and can mobilize people and give them stability to do their job without worrying about all the other stuff, that you can have such bigger impact.
That's great. Good. Thank you, Maggie. I needed that. And okay, admittedly, though, there are times when the big vision is just sort of sitting up there on the shelf and you need another cup of coffee or whatever. But what can make a day a real drag for you?
I am phenomenally patient with people, but I am not phenomenally patient with things. So computer systems that don't work and grant writing software that glitches when you have just spent 45 minutes on it and then it all goes away. Those are the things that that's what I don't handle very well.
And so when that happens, which it inevitably does, how do you keep yourself from causing harm in that moment? Like either harm to your stuff, like the computer itself, or harm to your employees around you, or harm to that next person who calls when you're in the middle of it?
Well, I'm proud I have never destroyed a computer. I think laughter is the greatest coping strategy. And sometimes you got to walk away for a minute and then come back and then look at the deadline and say, okay, I got to get past this.
So, obviously we're sitting here on a stage where concerts normally take place, and
you're not going to have me sing.
So, Maggie, what's your favorite? But, we have a piano here. We have lots of guitars and ukuleles and all kinds of stuff hanging around, and a lot of people on our staff are musicians. And so obviously for a lot of us here dealing with, intensity of our work and frustrations and stuff, music is an answer for us. But do the arts play a role in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's nothing like music. On the weekend is you're like, what music? How am I going to start my day? What am I going to listen to? Going to the theater, Shakespeare in the Park, just sitting down with a good book. I started out with an example from pottery. That's because one of these days there will be a pottery business. I have thrown pots and I've got all the stuff to do it. I just don't have the time now. But there is a hankering for me to get my hands in that wheel going. So, yeah, wow. Absolutely.
I love that. Do you, it sounds like you go out for arts events and stuff. Is there a sort of personal creative practice that's part of your life in any way? Are you able to carve out time for that?
I used to. Not so much. I'd say probably, if I am going to carve out time for kind of wellness and things, it's probably going to be getting into nature. I'm an Adirondack girl. Put me in the woods, put me in the water in a kayak. Those are my happy places. I come from a whole family. My house is full of things. I come from a family of craftspeople. Oh, wow. And we all used to, every holiday, all of our gifts would be really beautiful things that we made for each other.
Neat.
Yeah, so.
There's somebody knitting in the room right now. I love that. Is that Sarah? Yeah. Hey. Great.
I used to do chip carving with my kids when they were at the playground. I have a whole bunch of cutting boards I would chip card while they were in the playground.
Oh, neat.
So yeah, so good for you, knitting.
Let me ask you this, though. Does the work itself feel creative?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a science, it's an art. There is an art to how you bring people together, how you create a message about the really difficult things we do that, most folks, oh gosh, we got a speaker coming about domestic violence and sexual assault, how wonderful. But then when you get them in the room together and you start talking about it, people get motivated and want to come up to you later and talk, and how can I help? What can I do? So there is an art in engaging people in wanting to be part of the visions that we have.
It totally is. And, there's that feeling that you get, almost a physical feeling when you're doing creative work, where it's almost like a meditation in a way. It's just, it takes over your whole mind. And I feel that a lot. And I could just be sitting there like writing emails or something, or, preparing a talk or whatever. But for me, it is that sort of full body creative feeling that I get.
And time just goes. We've just started periodically doing a little neurographic art with my staff, just to kind of give them some skills for personal wellness, but also give them some tools that they can give to our clients. And we can have some paint supplies and some paper and markers and be doing something, and there'll be 15 of them in the room and not a bit of talking, because everyone is just in the moment, in the creation that they're doing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, because I want to just understand a little bit better the kind of core purpose of the work that you are doing through Wellspring. Your goal is to end domestic violence, relationship abuse. Where do you think that all comes from? What is domestic violence all about? Why is it so persistent?
We made a mistake 40 plus years ago in our field in trying to educate girls and women about how not to be victims. And that's a mistake, because it's not putting the onus of responsibility where it belongs. And so you say, okay, we've got to work with folks not to be abusers. That's very important. We'd like to get that message out there. But even more, we have to work with society, because abuse starts with social norms that allow that kind of power and control. And it's really getting to those upstream social norms. Like, what are the things in our society that contribute to sexism? Even looking at things like pay equity and equity in the relationship. Who does the child rearing? And until we address those issues, and each of us as a human starts to consider our own privilege and how our privilege can sometimes make it so other people are unprivileged, until we do that, we are not going to fix any of these social problems, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's folks who are housing unstable. And so it's really the upstream social norms that I think we have to challenge. And the good part about that, though, is that every one of us can be part of the solution then. Mm-hmm. We can introduce these concepts into our conversation. We can look at our actions and how they affect our climate, how they affect equitable housing for everyone, how they affect the fact that women, this is Saratoga County in New York State, has the highest pay inequity between women and men. On average, women make $18,500 less than men do. Like, ask ourselves, why is that?
Maggie, why is that? What the
Because
heck?
we don't talk about it.
Oh, wow.
And Saratoga County is a wonderful place to be. You see all the studies. We are the number 2 healthiest community in New York State. You see those wonderful things. But there are some things that, unless you really think about them, we don't have adequate public transportation. We really struggle with affordable housing. Pay inequity for women can really limit them in what their options are in life. Mm-hmm. And so until we address those things that may not be affecting us. You know, every morning I get in my car, I drive to work, I can leave when I need to, I can get where I am. But sometimes I think about, what if I didn't have my car? What if I relied on public transportation where I am? That would limit my job choices. So I think in our privilege, we have to think about, boy, I'm really lucky that today I can get in my car. Does our county have what I need that everybody can get where they need to go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's big, and this kind of it's what you're talking about speaks a little bit to the inspiration that I had in doing this series, because what I came to realize is that every one of us is in some way addressing what you're talking about right now, which is healthiness and fairness in our world. And whether you're looking at abuse or homelessness or preservation of nature or the arts or anything, like ultimately that's where we're going with it. And that's why we all belong at the table together in conversation with one another, working together. So I really appreciate that message. Those are massive, far-reaching goals that you're talking about, and there are times when you must get disheartened. And I think that we try not to talk about the moments when we're disheartened, because again, it's that like wanting to, show the world that we can do it, that we're being realistic, that we have a plan and all of that. But when those moments come, when maybe your faith and your ultimate success maybe flags a little bit, how do you deal with that? How do you get back on the horse, to use a Saratoga metaphor?
That's a great Saratoga metaphor. I think one thing is to take a minute and put it in perspective. I know sometimes when I'm talking to my younger staff, they kind of think about how inequitable the world is for women and sexual harassment. And I take them back a decade and a decade and a decade and a decade to when I was their age. And I remember I was in a job at one point where in some ways we were all friends. It was a wonderful environment, but it was very sexually harassing. There weren't sexual harassment laws when I was a lass. And we have come so far. We've come so far in that we're talking about these things. So I think in those moments you're disheartened, sometimes you have to kind of look at the measure and say, what have we accomplished? And okay, what else do we need to do? That's where we're always looking, but look at that. And then also realize we can't change everything, and change that lasts does take a long time. I think very often, very quick change will bounce right back very quickly. Because as people, we don't like change. And so we have to get comfortable with moving a little bit closer until something becomes, okay, this is where it should be now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that in your line of work, that's probably a very big issue for people moving out of and beyond domestic abuse situations, is just also contending with just a major life change in the midst of all of that.
Major life change. I think people say, oh, why don't people just leave? But you think about it, you're leaving the partner you thought you'd spend your life with. You're maybe uprooting your children, your home, you're changing, your friends change, family relations change. Everything in your life changes.
Yeah. Wow. Do you have any, could be books, films, gurus, mantras, anything that are important for you that you would want to mention to other people that they might get something out of?
Oh, so many. I think one of the things I want to talk about is kind of our sector, the impact sector or the nonprofit sector. So let me talk a little bit about that.
Please do.
I'm going to challenge us not to call ourselves nonprofits because the work that we're doing, whether it's housing people who are homeless, feeding people who don't have food, helping people with mental health disorders, substance abuse, with domestic violence, with sexual assault, with all of the things that our agencies do, those are huge community issues. And we're looking at our sector, and we define ourselves as nonprofits or charities. And what we need to do is not talk about that, but talk about our impact. So you might hear me referring to our sector very often as the impact sector. So going to who that guru is, Dan Pallotta has been speaking for decades now about kind of the charity to impact sector, like the under-resourcedness of our organizations. Nonprofit is an IRS tax designation. There's times to use that word, but when we are allowing ourselves to be under-resourced, what we're doing is we're not able to make that great impact and do all of the work that we could. So I'd say check out Dan Pallotta. He actually...
Spell the last name.
Pallotta, I believe.
Okay.
He wrote a book, probably a decade and a half ago called Uncharitable. He's just made it into a movie that should be in the movie theaters right about pretty soon. But it talks about these issues, and it really makes you think about these organizations that the community supports and how, with the right resources, they could be doing so much more to really amp up the work that we're doing to solve these problems. And the other thing is, let's not look at solving them just ourselves, because I think we often do look to the impact sector to let's fix the transportation problem in the community and let's find more affordable housing. But that's not something we can do alone. But when we collaborate with business, when we collaborate with our elected officials, these are all things that make life better for the clients who come to our agencies, but they also make life better for the entire community. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I challenge us to do is to work together cross-sector, because if we have better transportation, then guess what? My clients can get where they need to go, but also businesses, employees can get to them. And it makes for a more vibrant community. So I think I would challenge any one of our leaders in the impact sector not just to look at the mission of your organization, but to look at how you fit in this complex whole as a community. And we have great community leaders who do work very much together. But we have big goals, and I want to invite business and community members and our elected officials to join with us in a vision.
Schools, everything. I agree with you so much, and I would say that I had that epiphany probably about, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. I was beginning to sort of get there in my head, and not just thinking about succeeding as an arts organization, but what is the role of the arts in a healthy community? What do we have to bring to the table? And particularly as a folk music organization, we are all about making stories visible and creating shared emotional experiences that get to the root of our humanity, where we are all the same, and some of these superficial differences that we have begin to disappear and seem less important. And when I began to think about the arts in that way, that's where this conversation series came from. That's where Community Classroom came from. That's where Caffe Lena on the Road, where we go out to shelters and, soup kitchens and elder care centers with live music. That's where all of that came from. And it's much more inspiring to do that work, I feel like. But it's also, just in practical terms, opens up the possibilities for a much wider swath of the community to engage with your organization.
Absolutely. And it also allows us to celebrate the talents of people. I remember at one point you had a display here with the faces of folks who were living in shelters of Saratoga at the time and their stories. And they came and told their stories, and they were remarkable. I know in my past office, we had the Creative Expressions program from Saratoga Bridges. We had artwork by folks who have developmental delays and traumatic brain injury, and we had it in our conference room, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I have a whole collection of artwork from the Creative Expressions program because every month I would buy one. And so it is the arts help us to reach out to humanity, just like you said. And I think that's where the magic of pulling community together happens.
Well, great. So with that challenge in mind for the folks who are here from other nonprofits right now, I think that that's a wonderful way to end this series and to end a year that has been a momentous year for a lot of organizations. Just what is the wider purpose of your organization and the broader community? And that's a beautiful thought to carry forward. So Maggie, thank you so much for sharing your time and your talent with Saratoga. It wouldn't be the same without you. And thanks for being part of this series.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
All right.